What are you doing with your wounds? What are you doing with your scars? As Christians, we like to hide our wounds and our scars because we want to look perfect. People do this in general. It doesn't, not just only Christians. That's why Instagram is so popular, and Facebook and Snapchat and everything else that makes people look like they're better than they really are. But this Instagram Christianity, where we only post the ups and never post the downs, which thankfully I think this is sort of coming to an end. I think people have sort of smelled the rat, so to speak, and are kind of waking up and realizing that this is not as authentic as it could be. But it's toxic. It gives people a false idea of what Christianity is really like. And there's something really important about scars. There's something really important about things that have happened to us in life, or ways that we can relate to people through things that have happened to us. They're important. They matter. They do. And there's a pretty good example of somebody that's pretty prominent in the Bible that has scars and isn't afraid to show them off for a good reason. In John chapter 20, Jesus has appeared to the disciples, but Thomas, this guy named Thomas, who's one of these 12 disciples, isn't with them when it happens. And the disciples tell him about it. They're like, man, you're never going to believe it, Thomas. Jesus appeared to us. Like, he's actually alive. He really rose. And Thomas is like, no way. I don't believe it. I need to see him, and I need to I want to put my fingers in the holes in his hands and my fist in the wound in his side, or I'm not going to believe. He's basically saying, unless I can see him and touch him, like, I don't know if you guys are crazy or, like what you guys are doing up here, but I think you might be off your rocker. I think you might be making a mistake here. You might be having a mental breakdown. I don't know that this is really legit, and unless I can see him and touch him, I'm not going to believe. And how often it is that people, even people who have been in the presence of God, need to be able to see and touch with their hand. How often it happens that somebody needs someone to see and to touch in order to be able to believe. Frequently, this is why our testimonies matter. Your testimony matters. And not the watered down, cleaned up, rated G version, the real one. It doesn't mean that you stand up in the middle of church and talk about, every little detail, but this does mean that when people need the unadulterated, unfiltered, not watered down testimony, that we give it to them, that we show them the scar. And like I said, there's somebody, he's kind of famous, but there's somebody in the Bible that was willing to show off his scars to help somebody believe. John chapter 20, starting at verse 26. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." And Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." Jesus was willing to show his scars so that somebody who couldn't get over the hump of disbelief, of hurt, because Thomas has been following this guy for literally years. And then his master, this teacher, this person that he thought was going to make everything different in a certain type of way, dies, is gone. The dream is dead. Hope is gone. There's no hope left. There's nothing left. There's no hope. But Jesus is willing to say, "Hey, look at what God has done. Look at my hands. You could touch them. I'm real. Look at my side. Jesus has got these scars, these wounds, and he's not bleeding anymore, and we shouldn't be bleeding on people with our testimonies, but we should be able to tell people about what God has done, because it makes a difference when you tell someone your real testimony, and you don't make it Instagram clean. You don't make it different than what it is. You don't make it into the testimony that you wish it was by cutting some parts out and splicing some parts in. Let's tell people our real testimonies. Let's show people what God has done. Because the same Spirit that raised Christ Jesus from the dead lives in us. And we can show people, hey, look at these scars. Look at what God saved me from. Look at what God did in my life. And that will help people believe, because they'll know, for one, that they're not alone. And for two, that God can do it. This week, try to remember the unfiltered testimony and tell somebody what God has done. Be blessed.